All right, so let's continue. What we're gonna say now is really just since we only have like 45 minutes to an hour left. So what we're gonna say now is just really an introduction a little bit to what we'll be more focused on tomorrow. And this topic is the idea, once we start speaking about soul, the idea of the relationship between intellect and emotions. So we started speaking about how the soul ultimately and most importantly resembles, on the most basic level, on the level of will. So if you don't have a will, you don't have anything, right? But what are the most basic functions of the human soul? So you can say action, you can say speech, you can say thought, but what is the soul? How do you identify the soul? So actually we're gonna say now say and write some basic ideas. We'll see how much we can get to explaining them more in length, but let's get to it. So in the timer, it is explained in really length how the soul is really, there is two parts to the soul. There is the soul, and there is the garments of the soul. So, what is the soul? So we said, well, we don't really know what the soul is. But the first thing we see is it's a fact. It's a fact. What it's causing. Well, what do you see of the soul? So on the most basic level, you see some action. On a higher level, you see speech. And on a higher level, is speech with the two E's or EA? Correct. Two E's. And on a higher level, there is thought. But these are not the soul themselves. These are mediums through which the soul expresses itself. And that's why we call them garments of the soul.
Even thought?
Yeah. Because thought is a garment which you can use the garment of thought for many things. You can use it for emotions, you can use it for intellect. Yeah? When you think about an emotion, you're thinking about it. But you're not, so it's like neutral. All these things are neutral. It all depends on what you put into them, right? Acting, speaking, and thinking doesn't mean that you're smart, doesn't mean that you're good, doesn't mean you're bad, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a way to express. And now the question is then, so in Hebrew, I'm just going to write it down, it's called Maaseh, Dibur, and Machshava. So, usually we say the other way around. So, Machshava, Dibur, Maaseh. Because we go from inner to outer. Now, what Bracha can ask, well, you said it's a way of expression. But so I understand action is a way of expression. I understand speech is a way of expression. But why is thinking a way of expression? Nobody sees my thinking and nobody hears my thinking. If I'm lucky enough not to think loudly. But so why is thinking an expression? So Hasidus does say, yes, it's a very unique way of expression. This is the most internal way of expression. But it is a way of expression because, first of all, we see that usually action and speech are before action and speech you think. So the thinking is like a preparation to speak and to act. And also it's like is, you could say, maybe it's not an expression to the outside world, but it's an expression towards your consciousness. Your consciousness. So it is an expression. So when speaking about garments, I think Chassidus quotes, I think from the Zohar, that it's just like the garment of the turtle. The panzel, how do you say panzel?
Shell?
The shell of the turtle, which is a garment, but it's part of him. So thought is an internal garment. It's like your underwear, right? It's a garment, nobody sees it, but it's a garment. And by the turtle, the shell is not the turtle itself, it's not the life part of the turtle, but it's still, it's part of it. You can't take it off. So the garments of speech and thought and action can be stopped, can be taken off. Now I'm naked. I don't have any ways. I'm not naked, but I don't have any. I'm not expressing myself. Thought can't really be stopped. You're always thinking, but it can be changed. For example, you could force yourself to think this way and to think that way. So it's just a garment. It's a way of expression. So then, what is the soul itself? So we spoke about will a little bit before because we ran ahead a bit, but I just want to go now a step back. In general, Chassidus says that the soul itself can be divided to two levels: intellect and emotions. So intellect and emotions, this is the most essential part, which is the soul itself. So when you want to characterize a person, how will you characterize him? You will speak about his intellect and his emotional state, right? That's your characteristics. You're smart, you're not smart, you're street smart, you're sensitive, you have empathy, you don't have empathy, you're mean, so you're going to speak about who he is. You're going to describe him by the way of his intellect and by the way of his emotions. But we do say though that it's true that intellect and emotions are the soul itself, but if we go and dive deeper, actually they are also in a way just means of expression, right? What do they express? Ultimately they express something even more essential, and this is where will comes in. So will, because your intellect and your emotions is taking your will inside of you, but taking your will towards the outside world. Your intellect is used to think and understand things outside of you, and your emotions are always your relationship with an outside player, right? If there was nobody else besides you, you wouldn't need emotions. You wouldn't use emotions. Emotions is always based on, it's always a description of relationship, right? I love, I don't love, right? So this is the three major parts of the soul that can be broken up to. Then we can break these up to even more levels. And in general, this is broken up to 3 levels, and this is broken up to 7 levels. So, what are the 3 levels of intellect, and what are the 7 levels of emotions? The 3 levels of intellect, and this is important, because it's really basic Chassidus, is the 3 levels of intellect are, first I'm going to write them in Hebrew, Chochmah, Bina, Da, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, Malchus. And the will is called Keter. Okay? So we're speaking about, in general, we speak about 10 levels. It's called the 10 attributes of the soul. These are the 10 attributes of the soul. What are the 10 attributes? I'm going to translate it to English. I'm not sure I will give the best English translation because I'm not so familiar with the English text on this. More you figure it out in Hungarian, but I will try. So wisdom, understanding, knowing or knowledge, kindness, strictness, mercy. Netzach means so it's literally it means like from the word of lenatzeach to win over. But so I just want to clarify, not all of those are literal translations, okay? So for example, Chochmah is a literal translation, but Tiferes is not a literal translation. We just said the literal translation of Tiferes is, I'll write it here, beauty. But Netzach, so the literal translation is winning or eternity. But what we identify it with is motivation, I think, would be the best. Or creativity. Okay? Hod literally means either a certain how to say this in
Splendor or abundance. Splendor.
What does that mean?
Much of, I think.
No, it means like a king has a hod. It's like his
splendor would work
like
for that.
amazing,
Yeah.
like,
yeah, splendor.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that's the word then.
Yeah.
Splendor, or to olazot. I say that in English. What? Humility. That's the literal translation, but usually we would translate consistency, like or discipline. You know, discipline is the best. Yesod means, the literal translation is like a base. Foundation, thank you. And we would say it's connection. Like communication. Okay? Can't write it. Malchus literally means kingdom. And we would identify it with speech. Okay? So these are the 10 levels, and Keter literally means crown. These are the 10 levels of the soul, the 10 attributes of the soul. And this is a very basic theme in Kabbalah as well. The 10 attributes, they are mentioned in the writings of Reb Chaim Vital, who was the major student of Yitzchak Luria, Arizal, the most basic Kabbalistic master of the 16th century. He didn't have his own writing, but his teachings were written down by his students, and most importantly, the student whose name was Chaim Vital, who wrote the books of Eitz Chaim, the Tree of Life. And as well as there is certain references to this also in the Zohar, different parts of the Zohar. But one second. But Chassidus takes this and makes a system out of it. So again, it's similar to what we mentioned before, that there is certain references to certain ideas in certain ancient scripts, Chassidus takes it and makes a whole system out of it. Now, when it comes to these 10 levels in the soul, the Chassidus and Kabbalah says these are the 10 levels of the soul. They are also the 10 sephirot, the 10 attributes of godliness. So it's very important. So these are 10 attributes of the soul. Of the human soul, but also 10 levels of godliness. And we call that sephirot. Now, the word sephirot, it could have many meanings. In Chassidus we say it could mean sefer, sipur, mispar. The 3 Hebrew words that are similar to this word sephirot. Sefer, no, I'm saying sefer, I said it. Sefer, sapir, and mispar. What does this mean? Sefer means book or story. Sapir means a shining stone, like a diamond. And mispar means number. So basically, the simplest way would be to say Sephirot are some type of revelation of godliness. So that, and that's why all of these 3 translations go well with it, because Sefer, a story, is a revelation. Diamond is a shining thing, so it gives off like a light. And mispar, that's a good question. Why do we call this number? Because number is not something which is it doesn't resemble a revelation. But there is something here, which you might want to think about, is that we spoke yesterday about the unity of God, which is one. But the problem is, in creation, we see the opposite of unity. We see things that are extremely different from each other. You don't have 2 things that are the same. So the question of Kabbalah and Hasidic philosophy, one of the questions is, how do you reconcile this problem of that everything comes from something which is very one, but the things that come out of it are many and they are very different from each other. So Chassidus says, where does this multipleness start from? Where is the point where one becomes multiple? And he says this starts with the revelation of godliness, which is mispar, which can be numbered already. It's multiple. So, but anyways, so those are, we're going to get back to what it means in godliness. But let's get back to now to the human psyche. So we say this is the 10 levels or 11 levels of human psyche. It's interesting that, by the way, we're not going to get into it, but we always speak about 10, we don't speak about 11, although this is 11. How does 11 become 10? So it says, Shadas nimna, eina keser nimna. Sha keser nimna, eina das nimna. Just mentioning it. That whenever you see a list of this, it will be either without keser, but with das, or without das and with keser. Why? So it's either or. Why do we not? What's the connection between keser and das? We're not going to go into it now. But it's always 10, either with keser and without das, or with das and without keser. So, what are these levels? That's what we're going to be dealing with a little bit today and a bit more tomorrow. And obviously, just like in every other situation where we want to understand the levels of godliness, first we need to understand this in a human psyche, in a human level. So first of all, we will speak a little bit about the relationship of intellect and emotions. So if you were asked, what do you think is more essential to the human psyche? Intellect or emotions? What would you say?
Emotions.
Why?
Because certain people live with very little intellect, but I think very few people live with very little emotion.
So it's most people live by their emotions, and very few people live by their intellectual.
I would agree with it. The intellect tells you how to get what you want. The emotions tell you what you want.
Okay.
Both has to be in harmony, so to speak.
Right. It has to be right. So the question is, what drives what? So when we say, there's many questions here. When I said what's more essential, you could phrase this question itself in many ways. What is the driving force behind your actions? What is more relevant? And what is ethically more relevant? So it's three different questions. So Chassidus says that obviously, just like Sam said, and in a way also now, if you don't have emotions for something, it's very hard to act upon it. So most people's actions are derived from their emotions. But the question is, where do emotions come from? So do you need intellect in order to have emotions? So Chassidus says two things. Number one, ethically, intellect is higher than emotions. Number two, in the process, in the sequence, emotions are dependent on intellect. So the emotions ultimately come from your intellect. Intellect doesn't only mean to be an intellectual. What is intellect? Intellect is your first relationship with the outside world, right? What is intellect actually? Intellect is understanding something outside of you. Can you have an emotion towards something that you don't have an understanding of? Or you don't think that you have an understanding of? Can you love something that you don't know?
Well,
Kind of, yeah.
isn't that all we talked about yesterday?
Yeah, we mentioned it. And what did we say?
It's a matter of faith, but...
No, we didn't say that.
That's definitely, it seemed like that was the conclusion. We know it exists, but we don't know what it is.
Yeah, we didn't speak about emotions yet. We just said there's a certain level of godliness, the essence of God, which we know what it is, but we don't know what it is. Okay, so we didn't speak about emotions towards godliness. So that we could take that question or that statement to another level. How do we have emotions towards God? But that's a whole question. But I like the fact we did mention this idea. But basically, you cannot have an emotion about something that you don't know, or at least think that you know, right? I can love you by a certain imagination of what I think you are. It doesn't mean that imagination is right, but I think I know you. If I don't know you, I don't know of you, I don't know you, there's no way I'm going to have an emotion towards you, right? So emotion is a relationship between me and you, or me and my lunch. I have to know my lunch in order to have a relationship, an emotional relationship with it. So on the most basic level, I must have first an understanding of what I'm going to have an emotions with. So if I don't have intellect, I'm not going to have emotions. And this is even true on the level of animals, right? In order to have emotions, I need to have some type of intellectual capacity. So I have to understand the thing in at least a bit in order to have an emotion towards it. So that's why when we speak about these levels and we go from up towards down, we're always going to mention first intellect and then emotions, because the sequence of things are first intellect and then emotions. Let me just give you a simple example. And this is not about the quality of my intellect. It's not about the quality of my intellect and not about the quality of my emotions. It's just the fact that whatever emotions you have is dependent on your intellect. And let me give you a few examples on this. This is not an ethical question now, just the sequence question. What comes first and what comes second? I go over to you and I slap you on the face. You start hating me because I embarrassed you. So it seems like there's no intellect here. But if we dwell more into it, actually there is intellect here. Because in order for me to develop this hatred towards you, I have to have a narrative of what happened here. What this slapping on the face meant. And actually, if you think about it, it might be that I have a situation where the same thing happens and I develop a different type of emotion. So, for example, somebody slaps you in the face and the environment and the surrounding is that this slap on the face was a mocking, embarrassing act. So I will start to hate that guy. But that mocking on the face can also be a sign of love. And many times happens that somebody slaps somebody in the face and he means it well, but the other person perceives it as an embarrassing act. So it's all a question of narrative. How do I understand? How do I perceive the situation, what happened? So it's, before I get the emotions, I have to understand or I have to give an explanation to myself what happened here, and my emotion is going to be based on that explanation or that narrative of the story which happened to me just now. So this is a first example of where you see that you need to have first intellect, and then based on that intellect you'll have emotions. Then let's give a more general example. For example, people with more complex thinking, more complex intellect capabilities have more complex emotions, right? Simpler people with simpler intellect have simpler emotions. For example, yes, look at a child. Children's intellect are usually are simpler. Their emotions are simple. It doesn't mean it's not strong. It could be strong, simpler and stronger. It usually, because what happens when it's complex, you have complexity means that it's less harsh-shine. How you say harsh-shine? Less harsh. Okay, less harsh. So, like complexity is like many colors, right? So a strong color is one color. When you have a complexity of colors, it's going to balance. The one color is going to balance the other one. So a complex emotion means that I hate you, but I also respect you, right? Or I hate this situation, but in certain aspects of it I like. So in order to have such a complex emotion, you need to have a complex way of thinking of the thing, right? And when you have children, they're telling them, oh, you can't get a candy tonight. He's going to go berserk. He's crying and being upset. And you cannot, and his intellectual capabilities are not capable of understanding the complexity of, wait, I know you like this candy, but you have to understand in the long run it's not going to be good for you. And so it's not there, this more complex way of thinking, and therefore the more complex emotions are not there as well. So again, you see your emotional life is based much on your intellectual life. Then there's a whole different question of, there could be people that are very intellectual in some detached, not practical things, and they're very childish in their emotional life. How is that possible? You have a professor that is so emotionally primitive or childish or infantile, and that's a whole question of what. Because besides the idea of intellect and emotions and the way that emotions are based on intellect, there's a whole different thing of the connection between the two. And sometimes the connection between the intellect and the emotions are are a bit displaced. But the general idea is that when we speak about sequence, you must have intellect and understanding and comprehension in order to have emotions.
Was there anybody who connected this thinking with Freud's ideas? The subconscious and...
You're going to have to ask Professor Kegel. I think he's pretty knowledgeable about this topic.
Okay.
So next time he comes, you should remember to ask. I can tell you that there are many. I mean, I'm not enough familiar with Freud's and Jung's writing, but I can tell you that from the my very simple knowledge of their writings, I already know that there are many similarities, many things that are similar. Yeah. So that's why we speak about the intellect, and the intellect is above emotions. Then there's also another aspect of intellect being above emotions, and that is in an ethical sense. So in ethical sense, Chassidus says, your intellect, if you're an ethical person, your intellect needs to have more weight than your emotions, which means you're a person that acts out of just your natural emotions, or you're a person that acts out of conscious intellectual thinking. Why? Because what is emotion? Emotion cannot be detached from you, your ego. Emotion is always, is this good for me or not good for me? That's simplifying emotions. Intellect can be detached from emotions. You can say, is this thing right or is this thing wrong? So, and we see many times also that you have an intellectual understanding of something that doesn't necessarily mean that your emotions, that it resembles your emotions, because intellect is about truth, about trying to find the truth, what is right and what is wrong. Emotion is always about me. If you take out the me from the equation, you don't have emotions. By the way, I heard once that in English also, the word emotion is motion, and emotion is from the word me. But I don't know if this is true. Anyhow, so that's the idea of emotions. But intellect is about right and wrong. And therefore, if you want to be an ethical person, you have to be asking yourself the question, what is right and what is wrong, and not what is good and what is bad for me, right? And therefore, you always need to contemplate about the ethical right and wrong of the situation, and then instead of just listening to your emotional instinct.
Actually, my daughter is an accident, but very good example because she lives with autism.
In where?
My daughter lives with autism,
Right.
but she has an incredibly high IQ, and she's the most ethical person I know.
Very interesting.
Yes, she hardly has any emotions, but she can always make the right
That's
choice.
so interesting, by the way. I mean, it's a whole thing that I know very little about people with autism, but I'm relatively frequently think about this idea of what autism is and how Hasidus would define an autistic person, and I think that it sits pretty well in the psychological map of the soul, the way Hasidus explains it, that basically autistic people have this, they have the intellect is very strong, but the relationship with the outside world and the application of intellect to the outside world is just something, there's a bug there. And it's really the way it gives examples of this in Chassidus, and I don't know, in the times of Chassidus they define such a sickness or illness as autism.
Or probably people at her level weren't diagnosed. Because like if
She's not that extreme. She's not that extreme.
yeah, most people wouldn't notice.
Right,
She's
right.
autistic, by now.
Wow.
Of course, experts would, but
Right. So anyways, that's a good, I like that example you brought up. But so that's the idea of ethically being right or wrong. Ethically being a good person, you have to put the emphasis on the intellect instead of emotions. And that's another reason why intellect is above emotions in this list of Hasidic listing of these ideas. So I think this is where we're going to stop for today, because tomorrow we're going to go into detail about what these levels are, what in more detail. What are the 10 attributes of the soul? But if you guys have any questions yet, still, then we have question
I
time.
have something what is not so much connected to the Dutch.
Yeah?
That when we talk about the three levels of the material or of the living